On Christmas Day, the smell of cinnamon and pine should have filled the house with warmth, but instead it turned into the coldest moment of my life. My dad looked at me not with love, but with calculation, because he had just discovered I had $15 million. And before I could even breathe his golden boy, my brother stood up and demanded that I hand it all over, claiming he deserved it more. My own family turned a holiday into a trial, and I became the defendant. What happened next shattered everything I thought I knew about blood loyalty and love. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Sometimes just knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if this story touches you in any way, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every voice, every listener helps me feel less alone in this. My name is Elias Cross, and this is my truth. I had always preferred my apartment quiet, the kind of silence where you could hear the hum of the fridge and the faint city music bleeding in from 6th Street. That night, Christmas Eve into Christmas morning, the place looked the way I liked it, modest but orderly. A 4-seat dining table dressed with roasted turkey, the sharp glint of polished steel cutlery, a cheap bottle of Texas wine breathing at the edge. My little tree stood by the glass window, its LED lights catching the reflection and scattering faint nervous flashes across the room. The laptop on my work desk sat half-closed, its dark screen like a lid on something I'd rather not disturb. By 6:30, Lila had arrived, setting her scarf aside as if she owned the place. She saw the way I'd aligned the plates and smirked, helping me straighten the napkins anyway. Her eyes lingered on the empty seats as though she could already sense how this evening would tilt. 7 o'clock, the knock, the shuffle of coats, my father's presence filling the room without saying much. Grayson Kane. He was 58, but carried his silence like a gavel, heavy and decisive. Behind him, Knox swaggered in phone charger already in hand, Ivy trailing with her influencer smile polished to a gleam. The kids, Riley and Harper, were tucked into coats that cost more than half my rent. "Nice place," Grayson said after scanning the square footage in one glance. "A little small." We ate, we talked, though. Ivy made sure to curate most of it. She positioned everyone for a family Christmas shot, careful to edge Lila out of the frame. Knox slid into the seat closest to my desk where the laptop rested. I pretended not to notice. At 19:45, while I poured wine, the laptop screen lit up. A subject line glared in the glow: estate of Elliot Kane. Disbursement schedule. Clara Vaughn-esque. Ivy's eyes flicked sideways, her lashes lowering, then lifting toward Knox. He leaned on the mousepad, stretching as though bored. The email bloomed into full screen. Oh, Ivy breathed the kind of soft exclamation people make when they've just spotted prey. By the time I came back with the bottle, she had shifted her voice velvet smooth. "Family means sharing, Elias. These children need a future." Knox added with the shameless grin he used when he wanted something handed to him. "You don't really need all that, man. We're working on big plans." My father didn't say a word. He just angled his body toward Knox in silent approval. I cut into the silence with numbers. "Knox, I already covered your tuition, 50 grand. Dad, I paid off your 20,000 loan. I've been sending 1,500 a month for 8 years. That's 144,000 plus the extras. Roughly 200 grand, give or take. Do you all want me to show the receipts?" The table went still. Ivy adjusted Riley on her lap, cooing about the children as though the math I'd spoken hadn't just landed like an axe. By 10:30, the mood had soured, though Ivy still managed to pull the kids into another photo hashtags already forming in her mind. I cleaned the dishes quietly. When Knox suggested they spend the night, my father nodded once. Ivy smiled. I kept my tone level. "It's late." "Fine. But let's call it a night." Still, the screen's glow lingered in my mind. The laptop wasn't just a machine anymore, it was a box. And thanks to a glance and a whisper, the lid had slipped open. Hook. The LED lights blinked against the glass as I shut the laptop fully. I knew what everyone else didn't. Pandora's box wasn't closing again. It was 20 minutes past midnight when the sound pulled me from half-sleep, the low hiss of voices. The Christmas lights blinked faintly through the crack under my door. I slid out of bed, bare feet cold against the floor, and pressed my ear against the wood. "Doesn't deserve 15 million, Ivy murmured. Her voice was sharp even in a whisper. "Elias is fine," my father's baritone rumbled. "But Knox, he needs it more." Ivy outlined it like a strategy deck. Option A, persuade. Option B, file for guardianship, claim he's incompetent. I have a doctor who can write it up. Knox's hesitation was almost hopeful. That seems a lot. Think of the kids, Ivy countered. My hand clenched, but instead of barging in, I pulled out my phone. One swipe and voice memos was live. I slid it to the floor, microphone angled to the crack. Red recording dot blinking. Ivy's plan continued. Find a neighbor, someone willing to say I talked to myself. Helen Brooks will sign if I ask. She owes me. The chill deepened. They were building a case while sleeping under my roof. A buzz lit my phone screen briefly. "Lila, you good?" I tapped back. "Fine, talk in morning." I opened my laptop, breath steady, created a folder. Project Truth's Seed. Into it went screenshots, old tuition transfers, dad's car payment, the monthly log. Each file time-stamped. At 12:30, Ivy mentioned the doctor's name, Dr. Lila Monroe. A pediatrician, if memory served, not a psychiatrist. My suspicion tightened into certainty. I snapped photos, the voice memo file duration, clear time-stamped 12:28 to 12:45, proof they couldn't twist. Through the crack, I glimpsed my father's profile, nodding at Ivy's words about the children's welfare. His silence was assent. One more thing caught my eye. On Knox's phone, reflected faintly in the glass cabinet, a message bubble from Ivy. "Remember to sit near the desk. Screen wakes when sleep off." So the accident earlier had been rehearsed. The betrayal was layered, premeditated. At 1 a.m., the whispers died. I saved the recording twice, iCloud and an external drive. Insurance. The rage I expected never arrived. What came instead was something colder, sharper. Strategy. Hook. I titled a blank document, Project Truth V0.1 BNMD, and typed 3 headers: legal, data, media. Then I set my alarm for 7:30 a.m. The fight hadn't begun yet, but I was ready to write the rules. The morning air in Austin was sharp enough to sting as I crossed South Congress, the sidewalk still half empty from Christmas night revelry. Joe's coffee glowed like a refuge yellow light spilling from the wide windows, a chalkboard menu smeared faintly with yesterday's chalk dust. I arrived early on purpose, wanting the advantage of space and clarity. I chose a table by the glass where the security camera angled across the floor. The barista slid me a black coffee. I kept the receipt folded neatly, a timestamp in my pocket. At 8:35, Knox, Ivy, and my father appeared. Knox wore a bomber jacket too new for December sales, Ivy in a cream sweater that looked designed for Instagram more than warmth. She lifted her phone the moment she stepped inside, whispering merry vibes at Joe's to her followers, her smile lingering a beat too long at the camera. Grayson followed behind, silent, as ever, his presence heavy enough to tighten the space. I opened my notebook slowly, making sure each bullet point was visible. Tuition $50,000, car loan $20, monthly support $144, add-ons another $30. That's $200,000 already. My voice was even, but the air thinned around the table. Knox shifted, tried a grin. "I mean, that was help, sure. But this is about a chance to build something big," I cut him off gently. "This inheritance is mine. If I decide to help again, it will be through contracts, loans with interest and schedules. Nothing unconditional anymore." Grayson's jaw flexed a storm he refused to name. Ivy leaned forward, soft at first, but family is about sharing. The kids deserve security, Elias. She glanced at her reflection in the window, measuring how the words landed. I let silence expand. 20 seconds. Just the hum of the espresso machine and distant traffic. Knox grew restless. Ivy finally slipped. "We already have a doctor who'll help." Her eyes widened too late. I closed the notebook, meeting her stare. "If you want more conversation, it goes through lawyers." I stood, walked to the counter, and asked for the receipt to be stamped again with the time. The barista raised an eyebrow but obliged. As I left, Ivy's voice rose behind me, pitched high enough for the room to hear. "This isn't over, Elias." Several heads turned. She wanted witnesses, a sliver of public theater. Outside, my phone vibrated. A calendar invite sat on the screen. Wellness check. Dr. Lila Monroe. The event had been created yesterday at 3:12 p.m. Before dinner, before the laptop, before the whispers through the wall. It wasn't reaction, it was premeditation. The subject line read, "Family concern for Elias Cross's mental health." The creator was Knox Sterling. I stared at the date, the digital fingerprint of their scheme. In my pocket, the stamped receipt pressed against my palm like proof of life. The new year opened with a knock. At 8:30 on January 3rd, a courier handed me a thick envelope marked with the seal of the Travis County Court. My name printed bold against cream stock. Inside, a petition for guardianship. Petitioners Grayson Kane and Knox Sterling. Allegations: diminished capacity, financial instability, inability to manage estate. Attached was a report signed by Dr. Lila Monroe. I scanned the first paragraph and felt the floor tilt. Subject: demonstrates signs of cognitive decline, episodes of disorientation, impaired judgment with financial resources. The signature sprawled in blue ink across the bottom. Another page carried a witness statement from Helen Brooks, supposedly my neighbor, who swore she had overheard me talking to myself in Zilker Park. I logged into my brokerage account. $250,000 in short-term investments now carried a gray tag, frozen, pending court review. My chest went hollow. By 9, I was on the phone with Clara Vaughn. I could hear traffic behind her as she spoke. "Bring everything to my office this afternoon. Don't panic. We can cut through this." Her office towered downtown 14th floor glass reflecting the January sun. Inside her desk was a landscape of files and color-coded tabs. I laid out my evidence: 2 years of investment growth at 18%, a ledger of the $220,000 I had poured into my family, and the Christmas Eve recording, the voices hissing through my apartment door. Clara's eyes sharpened as she listened. "This is fabricated. Monroe has no standing to diagnose cognitive disorders. And Brooks will dig into her. Elias, we countersue fraudulent medical claims, financial abuse, recovery of debt owed." At 3:30, she leaned forward. "But we also need to bury their narrative. You'll schedule an independent evaluation. Ironclad." The next morning, I sat in a sterile room at Austin Medical Center, white walls humming with fluorescent light. Dr. Miles Carter greeted me, his voice steady, professional. The assessments ran for hours. Memory sequences, problem-solving, abstract reasoning. I answered calmly, each response like a stone in a wall I was rebuilding. By afternoon, Carter handed me a signed report. No indication of impairment. Cognitive functioning at the 95th percentile. His words carried the weight of a gavel. Back in Clara's office, she cross-checked Monroe's license. Her brow arched. She's a pediatrician. No certification in psychiatry. No credentials in neuropsychology. This report is void. It's fraud, plain and simple. The anger that had burned through me since the courier's knock cooled into something sharper: resolve. I finally had proof that what they built was hollow. Clara stacked the real report atop the forged one, the contrast stark as day against counterfeit night. She looked at me directly. "Elias, now we hold leverage. Fraudulent evidence, your clean bill of health, and a documented debt. When we step into court, we won't just defend, we'll strike." Outside, Austin dusk painted the skyline. My reflection in the glass no longer looked cornered, but armed, carrying the weight of both betrayal and the truth. The game they set had shifted. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt the ground steady beneath me. The rain had been falling since dawn, misting the windows of my office in East Austin, and for a few blissful minutes I thought the day would stay quiet. That ended the second my phone buzzed with a message from a coworker. "Zeph, you seen Ivy's post yet?" I clicked the link and the screen lit up with her carefully staged photo. A refrigerator door pulled wide open, its shelves stripped bare. Riley and Harper, my niece and nephew, sat cross-legged in worn-looking clothes in front of it. Ivy had angled the shot to catch the harsh kitchen light sharpening the image of emptiness. The caption underneath was short-barbed and perfectly calculated. My brother inherited $15 million but left his family to starve. We may lose our home soon. Family Justice ATX. Within minutes, my stomach clenched. The post already had hundreds of comments, then thousands of shares. People I didn't even know were calling me selfish, heartless, unfit to handle money. Ivy knew exactly which nerves to pluck in this city. Family children, the illusion of struggle. I walked to the cafe across from the office to clear my head, but neighbors averted their eyes as I passed. A woman I'd exchanged casual greetings with for years crossed the street before I reached her. On my phone, friends from college sent messages layered with judgment and doubt. Is it true? Are you really sitting on that money while the kids suffer? By 10:30, the story had reached the local Chronicle's online feed. My face was suddenly public property. I called Lila. Her voice was steady, clipped in the way it got when she was lining up facts like dominoes. Don't panic. They're staging a performance. We collect the counter-evidence and hold it until the moment counts. Within half an hour, she was in my inbox with a set of screenshots. September, Ivy and Knox clinking glasses under Hawaiian palm trees, captioned "Living Our Dream." October, Knox astride a gleaming motorcycle that cost more than some families' yearly rent. November, Ivy with a new designer bag and a watch I knew retailed for $3,000. I copied every file into my hard drive, folded neatly under Project, Truth, Social Media. My fingers shook, but not with fear, more with the steadying realization that they'd given me exactly what I needed. Clara called next, her tone measured. You do not respond online. Let them build their false narrative. We'll dismantle it in one strike at court, or in a public forum they can't control. If you answer emotionally, you'll hand them the advantage. The rain kept tapping the glass, and I sat at my desk drafting a statement. Version 0.2, I labeled it, outlining the money I'd spent supporting them, the trips they'd flaunted, the contradictions in their story. I didn't post it. I sent it only to Clara and Lila like a sealed envelope for the day the stage was mine. Around 5, a coworker texted, "Your family drama just hit the Chronicle's trending board." I refreshed and saw my name beside words like greed and betrayal. But one detail snagged my eye. Ivy's caption had included the hashtag Jew Family Justice ATX. Curious, I traced it. It had been created that very morning with only a handful of posts, all suspiciously polished, all painting the same narrative of me as a cold-blooded villain. The account administrator A profile linked back to Knox. He hadn't just encouraged the smear, he'd engineered the entire campaign, a digital mob built on smoke. I leaned back, let the anger ebb, and whispered to myself, let them keep building their stage. When the curtain rises, I'll flood it with daylight. The final week of January brought more than rain. At 8 that morning, my inbox held a message from the bank. Subject line, Notice of Temporary Asset Supervision. $250,000 frozen. 90 days minimum pending review of the guardianship petition. It felt like someone had stepped into my apartment, ransacked the drawers, and left the lights blazing. Still, I forced myself to open a new document, type the entry into my project, the truth log, asset freeze. Evidence of manipulation. Naming it calmed me, turned fear into a file to be handled. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from Clara in her glass-walled office downtown. She slid a draft across the table, a countersuit. Her handwriting in the margins was sharp, surgical. Fraudulent evidence. Repayment demand $220,000 plus interest. She tapped her pen. This isn't just defense anymore. We make the court see them as what they are: dependent, dishonest, and reckless. Your transfer records, your investment returns, your recordings from Christmas, they're not just shields, they're blades. I felt my breath slow, controlled. The image of Ivy's staged fridge flickered in my mind, but then I saw the screenshots of Hawaii, the motorcycle, the glittering bag. We weren't defenseless. We had ammunition. Back at my apartment, I built out the digital archive, screenshot after screenshot, sorted by month. Each file name carried a timestamp, each folder another nail in the coffin of their false narrative. That evening, I met Lila in a quiet bar on East 6th. The place smelled of wood smoke and spilled whiskey, but our conversation was sober. She slid her phone across to me. They're planning to make Winterfest their big theater. Ivy's lined up a speaking slot. She's presenting herself as a mother abandoned financially. I couldn't help a grim smile. Then Zilker Park will become our courtroom. Still, the weight pressed heavier as Lila lowered her voice. I dug into the comments on her posts. One caught my eye. She showed me the screen. A handle I recognized, AITA Parker. The comment read, "No surprise, Elias has always been cold." I frowned. Jade Parker went to school with Ivy, and now works for a PR agency, Lila confirmed. She's not a random voice. They're hiring spin doctors. Later that night, Clara forwarded me another surprise, an anonymous email sent through a burner account. Dr. Monroe received $10,000 to sign the report. Check her accounts. For a moment, my chest tightened. Someone in their camp was slipping me the key. Maybe guilt, maybe revenge, maybe both, but it meant a crack in their wall. I logged every detail: the freeze notice, the draft countersuit, Jade's comment, the anonymous email. Each piece filed, dated, sealed in Project Truth. Before turning in, I typed one last note at the bottom of the page: Zilker Winterfest, Franader's Court of Truth. Then I shut the laptop, listening to the rain ease at last. The storm outside might have passed, but the real one was only beginning. The first week of February, Austin felt like it was holding its breath. Gray skies pressed low over the skyline, the kind of weather that turned conversations muted and left people looking over their shoulders. I walked into the office at 9 sharp, and immediately felt eyes following me. My co-workers whispered just loud enough for me to catch the word Chronicle. At my desk, I opened the Austin Chronicle online and found the article front and center: Young Mother Fights for Financial Justice Within Family. The photo of Ivy cradling Harper, staged perfectly under soft light, filled the page. The piece quoted her at length: "My brother, an engineer, abandoned his own niece and nephew. We're left begging for dignity." I printed the article, slid a highlighter across the line that claimed a source close to the family confirms. I didn't need more than a second to know it was Grayson. His fingerprints were always in the background, never overt but present in the whisper campaigns that flared just before each article hit. By 11:30, an email arrived from HR. "Elias, the media attention is beginning to affect the company. We need clarification." The words felt sterile, but the implication was sharp: fix this or risk your job. At noon, I walked into the HR manager's glass-walled office, shut the door, and told her the truth in clipped sentences. There's an ongoing lawsuit, evidence of fraud, and nothing in this circus would touch the company. She looked skeptical, but nodded content for the moment to let the storm play out off the clock. Clara's voice filled my ear an hour later when I called. "Let Ivy spin her web at Winterfest. Don't swat at every strand she hangs online. The crowd will believe her until the curtain falls, then we'll pull the backdrop down and show the machinery." By late afternoon, Lila knocked on my apartment door with her laptop under her arm. She had built a slide deck the way a lawyer crafts an opening statement: a timeline of payments, Ivy's own Instagram flaunting trips and luxuries, Dr. Carter's medical report, and the Christmas Eve recording. We dimmed the lights and rehearsed. I played myself, she played Ivy, throwing accusations with venom. Each time I answered with data, not anger. Then she clicked to a hidden slide and said quietly, "There's something else." On the screen was a screenshot of a link Ivy had posted inside an Austin influencer group chat, a crowdfunding campaign called Save Riley and Harper. The target was $50,000, but the receiving account wasn't a public trust. It was Knox's personal bank account. The bile rose in my throat. It was blatant theft disguised as pity. An hour later, my phone buzzed with another anonymous message, the second one I'd received. Check Knox's spending. He used crowdfunding deposits to put down a DJ contract. Screenshot attached. The image showed a bank ledger, the DJ company's name printed clear. They weren't just dishonest, they were reckless enough to leave receipts. I copied the files into Project Truth, Legal, Evidence, and felt my pulse settle into something like calm. Every accusation they launched made their own armor thinner. That night I sat alone in my apartment, the hum of the fridge the only sound. I flipped through Lila's slides until I reached the last one, bold text in her neat font: Project Truth. Evidence plus public exposure. I opened my laptop and typed a single line into the log Winterfest. D-Day. The festival lights strung across Zilker Park glowed against the February dusk, white tents rippling in the cold wind, the smell of barbecue and kettle corn floating thick. Families huddled under scarves, children darted past with paper cups of hot cocoa. It should have felt festive, but the air crackled with anticipation, like the city had come not just for music and food, but for spectacle. At 6 sharp, Ivy walked onto the main stage in a tailored coat, hair curled to perfection. The banner behind her read, "Community Voices Financial Abuse in Families." She leaned into the microphone, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed but raw. Images flashed on the screen, the empty refrigerator, unpaid utility bills, Riley and Harper looking solemn. The crowd murmured, heads nodding in sympathy. Some wiped their eyes. I stood near the back, my pulse steady. When she finished, I raised my hand and asked the organizers for equal time. Murmurs rippled. They huddled for a moment, then nodded. 15 minutes. Enough. At 6:25, I climbed the steps, laptop under my arm. I plugged into the projector, and the first slide filled the screen, transfers totaling $220,000 over 2 years, marked for tuition, debt relief, and rent. The crowd hushed. Next came the photos, Ivy smiling in Hawaii, Knox straddling a $12,000 motorcycle, Ivy's caption about her new designer bag and watch. Whispers rippled. Then I clicked to Dr. Miles Carter's report. His signature glowed under the line that read, "Memory function 95%. No impairment detected." A man near the front folded his arms and muttered, "So much for the medical excuse." I pressed play on a short audio file. Ivy's voice from Christmas Eve rang out. "He doesn't deserve it. That money should be ours." Gasps broke through the cold air. 2 more clicks. A screenshot of the crowdfunding campaign with its target of $50,000, the receiving account, highlighted Knox himself. Then the bank statement showing a deposit routed to a DJ contract. The noise erupted, gasps, shouts, phones raised to record. One woman in the crowd, Clara Hayes, my old neighbor, stood tall. "We believed you, Ivy," she called out, her voice carrying. "But now the lies are right there on the screen." Ivy's composure cracked. She shrieked into the microphone, "You'll regret this," and Knox grabbed her arm, dragging her off the stage as the audience shouted them down. Cameras flashed, recording everything, and then the question came from the crowd, sharp and cutting. "Grayson, do you back Ivy's story?" He had been sitting at the edge, silent all evening. All eyes turned to him. His jaw worked. His eyes flicked from the screen to the audience, and finally, he bowed his head without a word. His silence was louder than any confession. The audience turned. The energy shifted like a tide reversing. Sympathy drained from Ivy and Knox, rushing instead toward the truth laid bare in data and recordings in their own greed. As I stepped down from the stage, a reporter from the Chronicle pushed forward, notebook open. "Elias, can we get your side of the story now? Will you go on record?" I smiled faintly, the adrenaline finally easing. "It's not about my side anymore. It's about letting justice speak." The crowd still buzzed, but for the first time in months, the weight on my chest lifted. The truth was no longer caged in my folders. It was free, undeniable, and echoing across the city. By 9 a.m. the second week of February, Travis County Courthouse felt like a stage I never asked to stand on. Reporters clustered at the doors. Neighbors from my building sat shoulder to shoulder with co-workers who'd only ever known me as the quiet guy who fixed production bugs. Clara walked beside me, a calm blade in a black blazer, and handed me a thin folder labeled in her neat caps, Project Truth Court version. Knox and Ivy were already at counsel table backs, rigid eyes anywhere but mine. Grayson sat behind them, hands folded, mouth set in a hard line. When the judge entered and we all rose, the room quieted to that particular courthouse silence that hums with judgment. The judge called the case a petition for guardianship over me filed by Grayson and Knox. The courtroom clock ticked to 9:15. Procedural formalities slid by like mile markers, and then the petitioners presented. Ivy went first, voice trembling just enough to look unmedicated but brave. She described missed holidays I'd never missed, bills I hadn't seen, the way I supposedly wandered trails arguing with invisible deadlines. Knox chimed in about my coldness, my obsession with money, how I couldn't connect with the kids. They painted a picture of incompetence framed in grief and duty. At 9:45, Clara stood. She didn't clear her throat or hedge, she just began. Exhibit A, she said, sliding a report to the clerk and the judge. Evaluation by Dr. Miles Carter, board-certified neuropsychologist. Findings: no cognitive impairment. Memory and executive function in the 95th percentile for age. She clicked a remote and the courtroom monitors lit up my December appointment, Dr. Carter's signature, the scale scores. No drama, only data. Exhibit B. She pressed play on a short audio clip. The room filled with Ivy's voice from Christmas Eve, smooth and certain. He doesn't deserve it. That money should be ours. A few people in the benches drew in breath. I watched Grayson's fingers tighten on the back of the pew. Exhibit C, Clara continued. Documented support payments from Mr. Kane to Mr. Sterling and Mr. Kane's father over the last 8 years, totaling $220,000. Tuition, vehicle debt, monthly stipends, rent. The monitors showed bank transfers and memos dates stacked like fence posts. Exhibit D, Dr. Lila Monroe. Clara let the name hang for a beat. Pediatrician. No psychiatric or neuropsychological certification. Yet the petition relies on her opinion to claim diminished capacity in an adult. That is beyond her scope. Ivy's knuckles went white. She shook her head and muttered, "Fake," but the judge lifted a hand and Clara moved on. Exhibit E, she said, last click. The screenshot of Save Riley and Harper appeared. The goal of $50,000 circled the receiving account, highlighted with Knox's name. Another image followed a bank ledger showing a payment to a DJ company the same day deposits hit the campaign. Murmurs rolled through the benches. At 10:30, Ivy burst out. "Those photos are edited, that recording is doctored." The judge leaned forward and asked Clara to address authenticity. She did step-by-step metadata from the original files, hash values, timestamps that matched server logs. Ivy's objections wilted under the weight of arithmetic. When both sides rested, the judge lowered his reading glasses and spoke with the kind of certainty that makes your bones stop buzzing. The petition for guardianship is denied. On this record, Mr. Kane is fully competent to manage his financial affairs. He turned a page. Regarding the counterclaim, the court finds credible documentation of funds transferred from Mr. Kane to the petitioners totaling $220,000. With interest, judgment is entered against Mr. Sterling and Ms. Quinn jointly and severally in the amount of $270,000 payable within 30 days. He paused, eyes settling on the exhibit still on the screen. This court is also referring the matter of the crowdfunding campaign to the appropriate authorities for investigation. A tremor passed through the room, gasps, whispers, the scrape of pens on notepads. Then something I hadn't anticipated. Grayson rose slowly from the bench behind Knox and spoke into the sudden quiet. "Your Honor," he said, voice rough, "I wish to withdraw as a petitioner." The words landed with a dull weight. He looked at me, then not defiantly. Not kindly, just a man who had realized too late that he'd stood in the wrong line. It didn't fix anything between us, but it stopped the bleeding. By 11, the gavel fell. Reporters pushed into the aisle, microphones aimed like spears. Questions flew about family, about money, about forgiveness. I kept my eyes forward. "The truth doesn't need makeup," I said into the cluster of plastic and foam. "It just needs light." Outside, the sun felt different on my face, not warmer, exactly clearer. The freeze on my account would be lifted. The judgment meant something more than money. It meant a record that couldn't be deleted with a caption. I walked down the courthouse steps with Clara at my side, and for the first time since Christmas Eve, my shoulders lowered of their own accord. Barton Springs looked scrubbed clean by winter rain the afternoon of the green Austin tree planting. The sky was a pale blue plate, the air sweet with damp soil and cut grass. Volunteers moved in small clusters, passing saplings in burlap and shovels with bright orange handles. It was late February, a season that made the city feel honest. I found my name on a clipboard, was handed a young live oak, and carried it to a plot marked with a simple stake. Grayson was already there, hands in the pockets of a jacket I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago. He looked older than he had in court, like the performance had drained from his face and left only fatigue. He cleared his throat. "Son," he said the word rusty. "I'm sorry. I let this go too far. I planted the shovel in the dirt." "You didn't just let it," I said quietly. "You helped it." He winced, but he nodded. "You're right." He bent to lift the edge of the burlap and hold it while I cut. We worked without speaking, the way we once fixed the fence at my mother's house when I was a teenager, coordinated by habit, not intimacy. Knox came a few minutes later, no Ivy in sight. He looked like a man who'd been awake for days, a little hollow clothes thrown on without thinking. He stopped 2 steps away, hands open. "I messed up," he said. "I let her run the plan, but I ran after the money. That part's on me. I didn't offer absolution." I pulled a folded paper from my jacket and handed it to him. A repayment schedule, interest, calculated installments mapped over years. "If you're serious, start here. No more borrowed emergencies. Real work. Real dates." He scanned it jaw tight, then nodded. "I'll do it." We lowered the sapling into the hole together. 3 men arranged around a small life that didn't know our history. Lila arrived as I stepped back to check the roots. She squeezed my shoulder. "Look at you, finally living for yourself." A volunteer came by with a bucket of water and whispered to me, amused and a little savage. "You hear Ivy's been blacklisted from half the influencer events in town. Burned her bridges with a flamethrower." I didn't smile, but I won't pretend the news didn't loosen something in my chest.